I'm now going to show you how to do a standard deviation. So a standard deviation counts as a simple maths process. It's not a sophisticated maths process in the Math Studies IA. So it's just a simple one. So if you've chosen to do it as one of your simple maths processes and you're not sure how to show the work process, this is one way you can do it and using Excel. So here's a general equation for the standard deviation. So you notice you need to have the mean in there. N stands for the number of surveys or countries or whatever it is that you're looking at. So in my case, I have 50 countries, but you might have a different N. And as you can see, we'll need 3 columns to calculate the standard deviation. And in the end, we end up just putting this number and this number into, this number and the N into your standard deviation square root. Okay, so also, what is a standard deviation, just in case you were wondering? Kind of tells you how widely spread the data is around the mean or average. So here's an example of a low standard deviation. So notice the mean is kind of through the center. So the mean would be about here. And if it's a low standard deviation, you can see the data is spread quite narrowly around the mean. Whereas if you have a high standard deviation relatively, and say the mean is here, so if it's a high standard deviation, then the data is spread relatively more widely around the mean. So more narrowly if it's a low one, more widely around the mean if it's a wide one. So it tells you roughly, like, it's a way that you can describe how the data varies around the mean. Like, is it widely distributed? Is it narrowly distributed? So let's get back to doing this. So notice you don't need to copy 2 data sets. You just do a standard deviation for a single data set. So you'll need to go to your raw data. So let's go to Excel. Here's our raw data. And maybe I'll do the first one for GDP per capita. So I'm going to Control C, select Control C. Let's make a new sheet. And let's Control V. Let's pop it in there. And maybe let's rename our sheet just so you can keep track of it. Standard deviation 1. So that way you can keep track of what you're doing. So as you can see, GDP per capita, according to this thing, is your column 1. So you've got column 1 done already. We need to find the standard deviation in a short way. So let's kind of do the short method first. So standard deviation, so we go equals STD. And notice there's 2 standard deviations. There's standard deviation for a population and standard deviation for a sample. And as you can see, according to our textbook, make sure you always use the standard deviation of the population. That's what our course requires. So we're going to choose the first one because it's standard deviation P. We're not going to do standard deviation S. So that's for a population. So select that, double click on standard SD dev P and just select the data. So again, don't select the title. Just select the data from, in my case, 50 countries. Enter. So here we can see what it's going to end up being worth. So the standard deviation is going to end up, it's supposed to end up being this value. So when we do our work process using this table, when we put this number, and in my case my N is 50, so I've got 50 countries, into the square root, then we should end up getting this value. So it's good to have the short process done first. Now again, I would just save what you're doing as you go. So as you can see, maybe let's copy and paste in the titles if you want. So these are what we're going to need. And again, once you paste your Excel table into Word, then you can pretty it up then. So I'm just going to scroll this down a bit, and that can go in here. It's a quick way, or you can just individually slot them in into each cell. Sometimes that's faster actually. There we go. So these are going to be my 3 columns. This is my X, this is X minus the mean of X, and this is X minus the mean of X all squared. So obviously we're going to need the mean of X. So mean GDP is what we're going to need to have over here as well, because notice we need the mean of X. So remember, the mean in Excel, they call it the average. So type in AVE and double click on the second one, which is average. So double click on average and let's calculate the mean. Calculate the mean, close brackets, enter. There you go. So there's our mean over here. So the quick way to do X minus X mean, remember we go equals, click on your X, which is this on the column to the left, X, type in minus, and click on the mean. And what's important is, again, we have to lock this mean. So to lock it, remember, we just put a dollar sign before the L. In my case, it's an L. Dollar sign here and a dollar sign here. So notice we don't put a dollar sign here because we want this to vary with each row. But we want it always to be this number minus this exact number. We don't want it to change. So we want this number always to be that exact number. So putting the dollar signs here locks it. And then you can just press enter. And that one's been worked out for you because that makes sense. 962 minus this big number probably is negative 14,000 and something. So grab it. So make sure your fatter cross becomes the thinner cross and click and drag it down. There you go. So we've calculated that for the whole section. Now we've just got to do this one, which notice happens to be the previous column squared. So that's easy. Just go equals, click on this. And to do squared, you can do upward arrow 2. That's how you do squared. And press enter. Again, we need to scroll down. So I've got some big numbers here. Very big numbers. That's okay. So notice I've done all 3 of the columns. Now let's see what we need to get. What we kind of need is, we need this number here. The number 35 they just use to calculate the mean, but so what we really need is we need the number 16, and your N will be however many countries or surveys you've got. So in my case I have 50 countries, so I'm going to have 50 there instead of 7. So we need to work out this sum down here. So let's work that out on Excel. That's easily done. Let me just scroll down a bit. So go equals SUM to work out the sum. Double click on sum, and I like to scroll up first, that's just how I do it, and select all the numbers you want the sum for, only down to there, close brackets, enter. Maybe make that bold and red or something, or a different colour at least, just so that you realise it stands out, that this is the sum. I want to put sum or something like that there. You might also like to grid lines on your table, just in case people aren't sure how to do grid lines. This is how you do it. You select the table, go up to this drop down box and select all borders, because some people have been confused about how to do that. Now maybe you want a border on there too. So we've got a nice table that could be pasted into Word. Again, you would have to type these headings yourself, but that's more easily done in Word than it's done in Excel. Okay, so we're almost there. We just now need to check that the square root of this number divided by however many surveys or countries I've got, like 50, does it equal the standard deviation up here, which should be that number. So let's check this one out. So let's check. This is how we do it. So equals, and remember on here, equals the square root of this number divided by how many surveys or countries you've got. So equals, to do square root, you go SQ, and see SQRT, that's the one you want, square root, and it's this number. In my case, I've got 50 countries, so divide by 50. Close bracket, enter, and look, that's the same number as the number up here, so I know I've done my process correctly. Now what we need to do is paste this into Word to some extent, and you want to show this notation as well. So we've got to kind of, we don't really need to show the working out for the mean if you don't want. If you've done that already, you might have done it already somewhere early in your project. Maybe if not, maybe you want to do that, or just explain how you calculate the mean. But we probably do need to sort of like paste in this kind of stuff. So again, you can type this all up yourself, type it all up from scratch. It would be much better, but because I'm doing a quick process now, I'll just show you how to do it now. So I'm doing another sheet. So there's that. And to do the square root sign, because remember we need to do the square root sign, you go insert, click on the pi where it says equation, and then to do the square root, see radical. So click on the radical, just select the first one. And within the square root is a fraction. So select the box, sorry, select that little box there, then go up to fraction. If this isn't appearing, just go back to insert equation. Fraction, there you go. And I've got 50 on the bottom because I've got 50 countries, but you'll probably have a different number, however many countries or surveys you've got. And let's see, will this number paste in for us? Let's go Control C. Let's hope for the best. If not, we can just manually type it. Nope, didn't. Sometimes what you can do is, what we've discovered is, you can kind of paste it over here, and then it will paste in nicely for you. Control C, Control V. There you go. I can get rid of that. And remember, they're calling it S equals. So it's lowercase s, not uppercase s. S equals. And then you can then go equals whatever your number is meant to be. So your number is meant to be this number here. Control C. Control, there you go. And then it's up to you what you're rounding it to. You might want to leave it like that. You might want to round it to 3 sig figs or 2 decimal places or a whole number, that kind of thing. So it's up to you whatever you round it to. So if I was rounding this to 3 sig figs, it'd be 16600, because these zeros at the end are not significant. But you might choose to definitely don't leave it unrounded first and then round it, and it's up to you what you round it to, and maybe mention what you have rounded it to 3 significant figures in my case. Just try to be consistent with your rounding. I would suggest save your work as well. But then what you've got to do is you've got to go now and you've got to do standard deviations for your other columns too. So your other columns are here and here. So maybe I'll just copy them both. We can use the short method to do these ones. So let's go here. And I can call these standard deviation 2. So let's rename standard deviation 2. And rather than do them all on separate sheets, I'll just do them all here. So standard deviation CO2 for this one, and then the next one we can do standard deviation. Whoops. Standard deviation of methane. No, sorry, sulfur dioxide. SO2. So just doing that roughly here. So remember to do it, you go equals STD, and we select standard deviation of a population, not a sample again. Population. So see, this is really quick doing it the short method. Close brackets, enter. There's a standard deviation for that one, and then equals STD, standard deviation population again. Now select your sulfur dioxides. Close brackets, enter. And again, you would need to paste these into your Word doc, but you don't need to show the fully worked process like we did before. But you might just want to comment on them as well. Like, for example, the standard deviation of 35 relative to these numbers. Would you say it's big or it's low? Like, does it mean the data is quite widely spread? Standard deviation of 6.48, would you think that means it's narrowly spread? It's all relative to the number size as well. So looking at the other standard deviation, these are big numbers. So this standard deviation, even though it's a big number, you've got to look at, is it big relative to these? And in this case, I would say it probably is. That's still quite big relative to those numbers, indicating that the data is quite widely spread around the mean. So that's vaguely how you do the standard deviation.